Wildcats, John Schuster. We're going to be talking about what to expect in year two of a coaching change and what an expert like a John Schuster has looked for in the past. You're listening to Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for listening to Locked On Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke, joined by John Schuster. Hello, John Schuster. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Fair to Midland, as some folks have said in the past. Some folks from generations in the past like to utilize the term fair to Midland. Not entirely sure where fair is, but there are probably some Midlands around, and that's more or less how things are going.
Midland absolutely sounds, and I'm sure it is a city in Texas, but it does sound like
that way. Yeah,
it sounds like a place that would absolutely be in Texas.
Yeah, so that's fair, and I'm somewhere in between the two.
All right, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit. We're going into year two of the Jedd Fisch regime, and I was a little bit different than you. We graded a little bit differently, but you know what? Different strokes for different folks. First question I got for you, though.
Yeah.
You've seen some bad Arizona football over the years.
No, that's a lie. That's a lie right out of the gate. Nobody we know who has watched or listened to or utilized whatever sense they might have in regards to Arizona football can say that the product has ever been bad in their lifetime. You just can't. I mean, you could say it, but you and I both know that's a woefully inaccurate statement.
That is true.
Just because they were 1-11 last year and lost to NAU, how you could reach the conclusion that we've seen our share of bad football would be a difficult thing to reach. Before we get to your query, though, I have a query for you. Does NAU play ASU this year?
Let me look.
While you look, and I'm guessing the answer is yes. How possible is it?
Ooh, I know where you're going with this.
Yes. How possible is that? Well, obviously, I mean, you got one of them in the bag. And
yep, they are. They do play this year.
And you have an ASU team.
2022.
Oh, boy. And you have an ASU team that's really bad, going through a lot. Can you fathom NAU knocking off the two larger schools in consecutive seasons?
At what point then does NAU become the meteor that everybody's talking about conference expansion? How are we not talking about NAU at that point?
In the Pac-X, I think you make an excellent point.
Yes.
By the way, there are many reasons, since I'm sidetracking and using all of my material out of the gate in the opening segment.
You're good.
There are many. Thanks. I'm really good at pacing myself here. There are many reasons why from this point on, if I was putting the beer down, I would be pacing myself in a very different way. I'd be sluggish. Why from this point on, until some stuff gets figured out, you can be professional and call it the Pac-12, but I'm calling it Pac-X from this point on. Until they figure out whatever the crap is going on. The way I figure it works something like this. X means we don't know. It's kind of a placeholder. We don't know how many teams are ultimately going to be there. It could mean that you're dead. It could mean it's the Roman numeral 10. So, all of that fits. And even more so, if they add 4 teams and you stick with Roman numerals, all you did was add an IV and you could still be on life support.
Wow. That's deep on about 20 different levels.
I thought that was pretty good material. I'm sure nobody else in the listening audience did, but I enjoyed that while I was working on in-depth creativity and trying to avoid your question about what I'm looking forward to in year two of a coaching circumstance with the powerhouse that is Arizona football.
Let's go back then, because do you remember when Dick Tomey? Were you in? And I mean this actually seriously. Were you in Tucson by the time Tomey had taken over?
No.
Okay.
But we'll pretend I was. Let's pretend I was because I talked to people who were, and therefore by proxy I was intimately connected to Arizona football at that point.
Correct.
I think it's 1987, 88.
All right, so Dick Tomey comes in, and that was also pretty much that was kind of a train wreck as well, correct?
4-4-3. One of our
3 ties.
One of our mutual good pals who we occasionally hang out with at home, wrote in a column for the Wildcat that even Ben Lindsay could win 4 games in reference to what he thought about Dick Tomey's first season.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Suffice to say, this individual was not. Now, I don't know if football coaches actually have Christmas card lists anymore. At the time, they may have. And I don't know if reporters were on that Christmas card list, but I'm guessing that this guy was not, and perhaps never was. If there was a Dick Tomey Christmas card list, I'm thinking even Ben Lindsay can win 4 games, probably is going to get you kicked off of that thing.
Was that because Larry Smith, who Dick Tomey took over for, obviously was at that point considered the best coach in school history, and generally they were,
and should still be, yes.
Okay. And generally they were winning 8 or 9 games pretty much every single season. So it's like Dick Tomey comes in, and you're like, wait a second, this is a step backwards. Where Jedd Fisch has a leg up is nobody can look at Jedd Fisch's record and say this is a step backwards from what he inherited.
That's an excellent point. And I think in situations like this, you hope that Arizona shows signs of potential with a lot of the new recruits coming in. And you're still dealing with 18, 19-year-old kids playing against 22-year-old kids, and sometimes there's going to be a factor where they get dominated here and there. But Arizona last year, I think, was a reasonably competitive football team for about 40 minutes and then got worn out in the last 20 and the games got away from them. If Arizona can do better than 40, I think that's a step in the right direction. I would expect that. If Arizona is an uncompetitive football team on a consistent basis in the last 20 minutes of games this year, that would concern and surprise me. So I expect them to be more competitive, and part of me thinks there's a chance they can win more games than we think, too.
I love the over 2.5. Now, you could say, well, Mike, you also like the over of 0 against whatever it was 2 years ago, and that certainly didn't play out. So you could play that whatever.
What was it, 1.5 last year?
I think yes, and it was I think it was 2. No, it was 2 for a full football season.
And on back-to-back seasons.
Yes.
Those sucker bets made us suckers.
Yes.
So you're tripling down on Arizona's over-under line this year and guaranteeing that Arizona's going to win more than 2 games this year.
Third time's a charm?
That third time's a charm.
All right, but so let's talk about it a little bit though with Dick Tomey then, because he's coming in off the heels of obviously Larry Smith. What was just, and again, we're pretending that you were an expert from that time period, even though you were following.
Pretense. Yeah, I appreciate the pretense.
Yes, but what was your just what was the vibe in year 2 though? Was it like you quoted a good friend of yours who was covering the team for the Daily Wildcat, but what was just the vibe around Tucson with Dick Tomey early on?
I don't think he enamored himself to folks right out of the gate. Offensively, things I think were a concern. I'm not sure it wasn't the out and out apathy we've experienced over the course of most of the last decade.
Right.
But I don't think there was a whole heck of a lot of rousing excitement either. I mean, anytime you're in year 2 of a coach, you're still hoping things are going in a good direction. But Tomey, I'm not sure Tomey is the example that I'd make here. I think the better example and what you're hoping for, at least from a fan interaction standpoint, might be Mike Stoops.
Well, I was actually going to go there. I just wanted to basically today, which is Thursday and Friday, I just wanted to kind of go and
generally speaking, it's very. Tomey is a very interesting character, and our pal Brad Alice has talked about the revisionist history that has gone into Dick Tomey and his coaching tenure here. And I think he makes a lot of good points, especially in regards to how we look back at Tomey as being this phenomenal football coach who got the most out of this program that maybe you possibly could, and was a good character guy and had a lot of loyal players on his side. Much of that is true, but Tomey never really I don't want to say never, but didn't resonate with the fan base as much as perhaps he could have. And so as a result, when you're talking about the tenor of how fans felt about Tomey or felt about year two of Arizona football. I think it was it wasn't a malaise. I don't want to suggest that it was that. They had good numbers in the building. People showed up. They wanted Arizona to win. They felt it like Arizona had a chance, but I don't know that there was this rousing excitement overall around the product. I'm not sure what you're thinking in the mid-'80s. Do you think Arizona's going to go out and win 11 games, or do you hope they're competitive and maybe luck their way into something? I think at that point, that's more or less what the fan base was thinking. I think the fan base was significantly more excited with your chronology moving forward than it was ultimately under Tomey in those early stages.
All right, so then let's talk about it then. First, though, I want to tell you about Built Bar. John Schuster has friends in Utah. John Schuster has spent time in Utah. John Schuster knows the Utah scene. The one thing that John Schuster has been on from day one is Built Bar. When you look at Utah football, what's the one thing that you always think of? Physicality, strength, dogged determination, conquering in the trenches. This is Utah Ute football. Is there any doubt that Built Bar is based out of Utah?
Oh, I think there's obviously no doubt about that because you and I both know it, and now we understand why, and we have provided information as to why to our worthy listeners.
Not only have we diagnosed an issue, we've given you a solution already. That's the way it is, though, with Built Bar. Check it out. Schuster likes blueberry. I like blueberry as well. Check out the blueberry. That's called a hint. We will be right back with you. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. I almost said I'm your coach, Mike. I'm your host, Mike Stoops. All right, so one era, though, that because today and tomorrow we're going to be going in kind of chronological era, just kind of in that second year of a coaching change, because we've seen a lot of coaching changes here at the U of A. So Dick Tomey resigns 2 years after going 12-1. And I think, and you're exactly right, Schuster, by this time I was of knowledgeable age to at least understand what was going on. The city was ready to move on. No matter what anybody says, there were people that were rallying for Dick Tomey. There was just, I think people appreciated what he was able to do, but I think everybody thought that there was a higher apex that Arizona football should be striving for.
Before you continue, and apologies, I think Tomey is the interesting paradox here. Tomey is a football coach who needed to be able to get in front of the fan base on a little bit more functional basis, but I think deep down ultimately didn't care whether he was playing football in front of 50 people or 50,000. And that was oddly standoffish, I think, to the fan base, who felt like they wanted to be more connected. Now, part of the paradox here is that Tomey's the last coach who had who had Lunchbox Fridays, or whatever that event was, where once a week if you were a fan, you could show up and talk directly to Dick Tomey on a Friday in some classroom at the U of A, and he'd answer all your questions. No other coach, I don't know how many coaches did that before. No other coach has done that since. It wasn't that Tomey's phone number was in the book. You could call Dick Tomey if you looked up his number in the phone book. So he was accessible. He was this ridiculously accessible coach. So it's not like he didn't like the fan base, but he just kind of wanted to coach football. He wanted to build character. He wanted to guide kids. He wanted to be sort of a Father Flanagan thing. I think to a large degree, he liked the competitive nature of it. And to that degree, he didn't want to lose, but if they lost, sometimes that was a lesson in the long term. Fans don't want lessons. Fans want to win football games. And so there was this weird dichotomy that he always experienced. Even though there was accessibility, he wasn't really a marketing guy, so he didn't really care who came out and played for, not who played for his football team, but in essence, who watched his football team. So all of the excitement aspect, the marketing aspect, was not necessarily a Tomey strength. It had to be a strength with following athletic directors and other coaches that came through the program.
So John Makovic then takes over for Dick Tomey, and again, you're listening to Locked On Wildcats. We're kind of running through a chronological era. No, era is not the list, essentially, of just what Arizona football coaches have been facing in that second year to kind of compare and contrast to what Jedd Fisch is. John Makovic takes over after Dick Tomey, obviously in 2001. and it was an odd hire from the beginning. Nobody quite understood it. And, he comes in with this, comes in with the suit, comes in with, it's 110 degrees out. He's basically going to be the exact opposite of Dick Tomey. He's going to have high-rate offenses, and you know what? We'll take chances on defense. We're going to win games, and we're going to be cool-looking doing it. That never happened. He was never able to really get any credibility or any love from the city, to be honest with you, or at least from what I remember there.
No, I think that's it's hard to argue that. I think if you want an example of why throwing the baby out with the bathwater is a bad idea, it's John Mackovic and Dick Tomey. Because Arizona's entire attitude was, after they probably couldn't find whoever it was they were ultimately trying to navigate to hire for this position. And that process was messy, convoluted, didn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense either. What they ultimately chose was the guy who was in every aspect exactly the opposite of the guy you just got rid of. So what you're basically doing, let's say Dick Tomey was a 50% good and 50% bad coach. So what you've now done is thrown 100% of that out, hoping that you'll get what, at best, a 50% good and a 50% bad coach. So really, even though everything's entirely different, you've basically, in your best case scenario, gone for a wash. And obviously with Mackovic, it was not best case scenario. He never fit here. The arrogance never fit in. Tucson, especially its football aspects, Tucson's a very blue-collar town. There was that component. They liked Smith because Smith played good defense. Now, again, they want to win football games. Okay, so being tough on defense only gets you so far. Right. But that was Arizona's mantra. If you played Arizona, you knew that even 3 weeks later as a football team, you were going to remember, I remember when we played Arizona, because they kicked the hell out of us. We might have won the game, but they kicked the hell out of us. Right. Larry Smith had teams like that. Dick Tomey had teams like that. Mackovic went in, and I think the fan base appreciated that to some point, although they ultimately, again, wanted to win more games. Mackovic wasn't able to get any of that working. The attitude that he presented was anathema to a lot of Tomey's recruits. And then he couldn't recruit other players to suit him either, discovering that Arizona's not an easy place to recruit, and none of it worked, and it just completely exploded on him. And maybe we should have seen it coming, and it should probably be a cautionary tale for coaching hires moving forward.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with you. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, coming up tomorrow, we're going to talk about, I think, the most relevant comparison, and that's Mike Stoops, or for what Jedd Fisch is inheriting right now. Mike Stoops taking over for the John Mackovic era right there, and what he was able to do, how he was able to get people excited about U of A football. For as ever brief as it was, people here were excited about U of A football. There's no doubt about that. We're going to get into that a little bit more tomorrow, obviously. But, right now, again, the Tomey comparison, the Mackovic comparison isn't really astute. I just wanted to be able to kind of give a template as to what all these coaches have kind of had to deal with. And one thing about it is that Arizona football is just not an easy place to win. You've got to go kind of above and beyond here because it doesn't have, as our good friend Kevin Woodman would say, the built-in bells and whistles of other places across the country and, heck, even across the conference. So
I figured you were wrapping up there. That's why I let you.
I still got one more minute. We got to go over 20 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes, I would agree. I'll talk slow. I would agree with everything you just said in regards to how that lays out. But, I think coaching changes are always interesting. There's always room for hope. But how that manifests itself ultimately has to be eventually you got to play games and see how well you can do and whether there's improvement. And, I think those, the suggestions and evidence you're kind of using as we move ahead here are going to be perhaps interesting to delve into and look into as well, as Arizona was trying to make headway as far as its football program was concerned.
Okay, we're going to be back with you tomorrow breaking down the unenviable task of following John Mackovic which is what Mike Stoops did. And I think, well, you know what? I don't even want to, I want to tease this because I think that we hold Mike Stoops in higher regard, I think, than a lot of people probably do out there. And we're going to explain why and talk about how it compares to the Jedd Fisch era. For John Schuster, I'm Mike Luke. You've been listening to Locked On Wildcats.